Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Lee. I'm a lecturer with the Patient Safety Leadership Program at the University of Illinois Chicago and a Director of Patient Safety and Quality at the Academic Medical Center. And welcome this afternoon to our presentation, Just Culture, Rethinking the Balancing Act Between Individual Institutional Accountability and Event Analysis. At the end of today's presentation, my hope is that you'll be able to describe the key features of a just culture, discuss the difference between no blame versus a just culture approach to accountability, apply the just culture algorithm to a clinical event, identify the contextual factors that influence event analysis, and describe the organizing principles of an effective patient safety accountability system. The modern patient safety movement was launched in 1999 with the publication of To Err is Human, really the first national report that detailed the significant impact that medical errors have on our patients, our staff, and our healthcare organizations. An enormous amount of scholarly and operational work has been accomplished in the ensuing nearly 20 years. Understanding the etiology and magnitude of errors such as medication-related events and diagnostic errors, strides made related to patient safety event reporting, and the progress, albeit slow, we've made in fostering organizational learning. An area of intense interest has been determining how organizations approach fostering an organizational culture that supports the identification, analysis, management, and organizational learning associated with errors in patient harm. The Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality provides international leadership in the culture of safety space. Based on the substantial and substantive work that they, their colleagues, and their grantees have undertaken, they have identified the following key characteristics of an organization with a positive culture of safety. First, the acknowledgement of the high-risk nature of healthcare and the determination to achieve consistently safe operations. An environment in which individuals feel safe to report errors and near misses without fear of reprimand, punishment, or retribution. The encouragement of collaboration across ranks and disciplines to seek solutions to patient safety problems, and organizational commitment of resources to address safety concerns and to learn from events. AHRQ has been a leader in the development and facilitation of a survey of patient safety that many, if not most, hospitals and other healthcare settings field to assess their organization's culture of safety. Here we have the 2018 composite scores of all hospitals in the AHRQ survey database. Each of the issues on the left represents a composite of questions related to that issue. As you note, there are areas of solid performance, for instance, teamwork within units, and others where there are clearly room for improvement, for instance, with non-punitive response to error. The issues highlighted here are ones that, in my view, are the most direct measures of a just culture, and you will note that we clearly have some significant work to do to move the safety dial forward. Many of the organizations on the call today use this or a similar tool to take the temperature of your patient safety culture. If you're not familiar with your organization's efforts to assess the patient safety culture, I encourage you to reach out to your colleagues and discuss your results in your hospital's efforts to foster a positive culture of safety. Today, we're focusing on just culture in the context of event analysis. Event analysis is one aspect of a comprehensive patient safety management program. A well-designed event management program starts with an effective event identification infrastructure. This can be an electronic reporting system, a telephone hotline, a trigger tool program, daily safety huddles, and executive walk-rounds. These are very effective ways to know what's going on in your organization. Next, you need to have a process for objectively and thoroughly investigating an event. The organization needs to have an objective and contextually sensitive program for analyzing events. And finally, the organization must have a proactive and effective way to feedback findings and lessons learned about an event to their staff. Our discussion today will focus on the analysis process. sorry, I have a sensitive mouse. Early in the modern patient safety movement, many early leaders advocated for a blame-free approach to analyzing events. The thinking behind this approach was that the staff would be much more likely to report events and patient harm if they were not at risk for being punished for that event, regardless of the reason for the event. However, the no-blame approach has serious shortcomings that James Reason, an early thought leader in these concepts, captured well in this statement. A no-blame culture is neither feasible nor desirable. A small portion of human unsafe acts are egregious and warrant sanctions, severe ones in some cases. A blanket amnesty on all unsafe acts would lack credibility in the eyes of the workforce. More importantly, it would be seen to oppose natural justice. In response to the blame-free approach, the culture pendulum then swung far towards attributing all untoward events to a breakdown of organizational structures and functions. With this approach, all errors were deemed to be due to a failure of the system in which we ask our staff to work. The shortcomings of this approach were, again, there's in that it holds little room to hold those who are acting in malice and without regard for the safety of the patient accountable for their actions. And now the pendulum is seeking, I think, and finding its equilibrium, a forward-thinking accountability approach. As Sidney Dekker states, a just culture approach recognizes that even competent professionals make mistakes and develop shortcuts, workarounds, and routine violations. However, he declares an intolerance for this reckless behavior. He also advocates for forward-thinking accountability, which he describes as linking accountability not to sanctions or punishment, but to goal setting and moral deliberation about the practical processes needed to achieve these goals and the role that the individual needs to play in making these changes happen. So let's explore how we can achieve this forward-thinking accountability. Many of you may be familiar with this algorithm for determining culpability, introduced by David Mark and colleagues and refined over the past decade or so. This tool provides a framework for analyzing a patient safety event to determine if the error was due to a deliberate act or a result of failed processes or systems failures. Many of you may use a similar process during your patient safety event analysis activities. Whereas this tool and others like it can be very useful, there's a growing body of literature that cautions against the blind use of these tools without consideration of the influence that social, political, hierarchical, and other factors can have on the analysis process. This tool is based on a series of questions asked of the reviewers that lead the reviewers to make a determination of what caused the event. So did the employee act intentionally? Were the consequences as intended? Does there appear to be evidence of impairment? Did the employee knowingly violate safety procedures? Were the procedures easy to understand and follow? Would another individual from the same professional group with comparable qualifications and experience behave the same way? And were there deficiencies in the process, training, experience, and supervision? And the causes, as you can see from the black squares, range from malicious act to reckless behavior to at-risk behavior to systems failure. And in this context, at-risk behavior can be defined as it occurs when competent professionals develop unhealthy norms or behavioral choices or shortcuts, routine violations occur, and finally risk is not recognized or or it is recognized but believed to be justified. And then reckless behavior occurs when an individual makes a behavioral choice to consciously disregard a substantial or unjustifiable risk. So perhaps the best way to understand how this process works is to apply the algorithm to a patient safety event. So I'm going to describe in a very simplistic terms a medication administration error that's actually occurred, and we've probably read about it in the newspaper. Pediatric patient who was to receive 10 units of heparin. Instead, she received 10,000 units of heparin. The nurse did not use the point of care barcode scanner during medication administration. As a result, the patient developed signs of severe anticoagulation and was transferred to a high level of care. So let's use this algorithm to analyze the case, and here are the culprits. So I wish we could be a little more interactive in this, but I'm going to have to be the decision maker, and hopefully you'll agree with my decisions about the algorithm. So first question is, did the employee act intentionally? And yes, the employee did act intentionally in that she chose not to use the barcode scanner. But were the consequences as intended? Now we know that the nurse did not intend for this child to be harmed, so the consequences were not as intended. The next question we asked was, does there appear to be evidence of impairment? And in this case, there wasn't. The next question that we ask is, did the employee knowingly violate safe procedures? So in this case, it appears that she just decided not to use the barcoding system. And the next question that we're led to is, were the procedures easy to understand and follow? And in general, the use of a barcode scanner is a pretty straightforward activity. So in this case, the algorithm takes us to reckless behavior. However, as we'll talk about in a bit, many patient safety experts and social and behavioral scientists are cautioning that the social and cultural context of the microsystem and the larger organization, the biases of the reviewers, and the characteristics of the individuals under review, among other issues, must be considered when using one of these culpability tools. So let's take another look at this event, but this time with some more context about what was actually happening at the time of the event. So here's the same medication error, but let's add this bit of information. All of the concentrations of these heparin vials are stored in adjacent bins in the dispensing cabinet. So we've got, as you can remember from the image of the heparin vials, they're very much similar in looks, and obviously the labels are very similar. And typically, pharmacists and dispensing cabinets would have these placed in different parts or areas of those, the dispensing device or the pharmacy. We also learned that the dispensing cabinet was undergoing, quote, the dreaded system upgrade, so nurses were allowed to override the delivery system. And finally, this was a new nurse, and she worked in an environment where more senior nurses on that unit frequently didn't use the barcode scanner because of the unreliability of the Wi-Fi system in their hospital. So there's some context that we want to add to our analysis. So let's use this algorithm again and see if we get a different response. So again, did the employee act intentionally? Yes. Were the consequences intended? No. Does there appear to be evidence of impairment? No. But here, let's think about this differently. Did the employee knowingly violate safe procedures? Well, if she didn't understand the implications of having the systems upgraded, the dispensing cabinet that allowed her to override, and because if her more experienced, older nurses weren't using the barcode system, then perhaps it wasn't a true safety procedure. So let's say she did not knowingly violate a safety procedure. So then we're asked, would another individual from the same professional group with comparable qualifications and experience behave the same way? And there really are two ways we could go here. So let's say no, another individual with the same level of experience and the same qualifications would not. So then the question that we have to ask is, were there deficiencies in the process, training, experience, and supervision? And I would say yes, in that her supervision, the culture, the training that she received about barcoding would have led to have this be really a systems failure because she was put into an environment that really set her up for failure. And likewise, if we said yes to the question of would another individual from the same professional group with comparable qualifications and experience behave the same way, we get to that same systems failure response. So remember, when we didn't have the context, she was reckless, and we do have the context. We're really looking at more of an institutional or systems failure in terms of the reason why this error occurred. I think that Sidney Dekker captures what we just experienced when he argues that culpability is not an objective conclusion to be determined, but rather a judgment which is constructed socially, which is why there's so much discussion now about the use of these algorithms without making sure that you're taking into account not only the social, but the political and other contextual influences. And Cromie and Bott proposed that the following issues must be considered when conducting these types of analysis. You need to look at the personal biases of the people that are making the decisions. You need to look at the dynamics of their interactions as an analysis team. You need to consider the politics of the organization as well. What are the optics going to be if the chief surgeon is determined to be culpable? And sometimes organizations just need to have a scapegoat. You need to look at the characteristics of the judges, the reviewers, and you need to look at the characteristics of the people that are being reviewed or those under scrutiny. And then finally, as we just saw, you need to really consider what types, which, and how much information is presented. And then a study that Cromie and Bott did in 2016 further supported this notion when they conducted a study aimed at understanding the influence that contextual information has on determining culpability. In their study, they surveyed 3,100 aviation workers, and they were asked to judge the level of discipline they deemed appropriate in 3 separate offense scenarios. The results of the survey indicated that differences in judgments occurred as a result of the addition of important contextual information, as we just saw, and that differences in judgment also occurred based on different professional roles. So one really needs to be cognizant of who's involved with these analyses. I want to spend the last few minutes of our time together discussing how to build an organizational foundation that will support a just culture. Sidney Dekker is one of my favorite patient safety thought leaders. He has a remarkable ability to stretch our thinking from a theoretical standpoint while simultaneously offering up very practical strategies for improvement. In a 2016 article with Breaky, they discuss the elements of justice that are currently at play in many healthcare organizations around patient safety culture, and they advocate for the introduction of several other elements of justice. Retributive justice focuses on the rules that were broken, the individuals who broke the rules, and determining the level of discipline based on the severity of the error. So it really governs the proper allocation of sanctions for established rule violations. Most hospitals in 2018 have moved away from this type of response to error. However, many hospitals still have pockets of this approach sprinkled throughout their organization. One only needs to look at your patient safety survey results to appreciate that we still have a lot of work to do in this regard. Dekker proposes that organizations, both macro systems and microsystems, assure that other elements of justice be in place to support a truly just culture. So he advocates for making sure that substantive justice is in place. And this prescribes how regulations, rules, and procedures themselves are fair and legitimate. So it provides clarity and transparency to our staff so that they know what to expect around the rules. Procedural justice sets down legitimate processes for determining rule breaches, offers protections for the accused, and governs who should make such determinations. It provides an objective and fair process. And finally, restorative justice aims to restore the organization and the individual status and heal relationships and injuries of the victims. When we talk about victims, we talk about not only the patient as a victim, but the staff who are involved in any untoward event as a victim, which we sometimes call the second victim. And also restoring and healing the wider community in the wake of an event. So let's look at the difference between retributive and restorative justice. On one side, we ask which rule was broken. In restorative justice, we ask who's been hurt. To the question of who did it, we ask instead, what are their needs? And the question, how bad is the error and what do they, the individual involved, deserve? Instead, we ask whose obligation is it to meet these needs? And as important as the attention the organization plays to assuring that proper processes, and as we just discussed elements of justice are in place, important too is the role and contribution of the individual practicing within that organization. Rodney and colleagues, as well as Aveling and her team, write about the role of individual moral agency in patient safety. They argue that each person must be responsible for their professional actions, that they act in good faith and towards always the greater good, and in this case, the patient's well-being. Each individual has this personal responsibility to their patients, their colleagues, and their organization. Likewise, organizations must cultivate a moral community where members are encouraged to bring concerns forward and to collectively address these issues. A moral community can be characterized as a place where community members are encouraged to bring concerns to light and to deal with these in a manner that promotes shared understanding and mutual respect. And likewise, it's a community in which coherence between what a healthcare organization publicly professes to be and what employees, patients, and others both witness and participate in. And here are 4 principles to help incorporate these concepts of moral agency and moral community into an accountability program. First, a properly structured organizational and systemic systemic context is essential to reduce the prevalence of healthcare error. You really need to take a hard look at your organization. Do you have the processes and approaches in place that make it easy for staff to do the right thing every time? Or have we set our staff up for failure and harm? Next, each individual health professional must possess the competence and character crucial to the performance of his or her particular function, as well as those of the organization as a whole. So this really gets back to that individual moral agency. Third, the major function of a system is to reinforce and sustain the individual in their competencies and virtues, to support that individual to do the right thing every time. And finally, the system's effectiveness depends on a parallel affirmation of the moral duty and accountability of each health professional. So it's that individual and institutional collaboration. And finally, again, we look to Dr. Decker to provide us with some practical strategies and a practical approach to assessing our patient safety culture. I hope you'll take these questions back to your organization, whether it be a health system, a hospital, or a patient care unit, and do a careful assessment about your patient safety culture. So first, is the culture, the just culture process address harms, needs, and causes? Is it adequately victim-oriented, including both first and second victims? Are practitioners encouraged to recognize their contribution to the potential harm caused, but also treated as potential second victims? Are all relevant stakeholders involved in rule development and in the process of restoring trust? Is it based on dialogue, participation, and collaborative decision-making? Does the program identify and address deeper systemic issues that gave rise to the incident in the first place? And finally, is it respectful of all parties? And I'll leave you with these words of Liam Donaldson from the WHO World Alliance for Patient Safety. Human error is inevitable. We can never eliminate it. However, we can eliminate the problems in the system that make it more likely to happen. Thank you so much for dialing in today. And I'm going to hand the mic and the slides over to my colleague, Sean Betcher, who is an advisor to the Patient Safety Leadership Program, who will talk a little about the program and also answer any questions about the program. But first, if you have any questions for me about my presentation, we'd be happy to take them now. Or Sean, if you want to go ahead and just talk about the program, and we'll take questions at the end, whatever you prefer.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. And yeah, maybe that's the way to go. So if you go to the next slide, we did want to say thank you, Laura, for the presentation, and did just want to take a little bit of time to talk about the 2 programs that are offered here as patient safety leadership programs, where Laura is one of the faculty members for the program. Specifically, Laura, teaching that first course, correct? The PSL 401 course, yes. Typically, yes. So if we could go to the next slide here. These are just, so everybody on the line is aware, these are kind of the two options in terms of the program. There is a full master's program, so a Master of Science in Patient Safety Leadership program. There are 3 start points a year, so fall, spring, and summer. So fall and spring. So end of August or beginning of January. There's kind of 2 entry points here. You can enter as into the graduate certificate program, which is really the first 3 courses of the master's program. And then if you choose, you can move on into the master's program as well. And there's sort of the bullet points for each. Completely online for the certificate program. There is a 3-day residency requirement here in Chicago. If you choose to move on to the master's, that happens around halfway through the program. We actually just had one of the groups come through for their residency just last week. So that was great to see everybody for that. But really what's happening at that residency is that you're getting your capstone project, which is what you do if you move through the master's, approved. And then you have a mentor through the back half of your program in order to implement or your actual capstone project. There is a third option here, and I'm going to point this out because if there is anybody on the line that does want to get started, the actual application deadline was December 1st, so this Saturday. But if you do want to get started, there is an option to actually just take the first course as an extramural student. So again, if that is something that you're interested, at the end of the presentation here, we'll have our contact information. But yeah, if you wanted to go to the next slide here, Laura. Here's just sort of examples of the capstone projects that have been completed. We're sort of highlighting some here as well. But anything that you would want to add, Laura, about the capstone project? I know you've been involved in some, you've been a mentor for some, but sort of and I know sort of you guys kind of start talking about that program the capstone project specifically in the first course.
Sure, thanks, Sean. So first of all, I am not only a lecturer instructing the program, but I'm also a graduate of the program. So I graduated in 2012. So I can sort of speak to issues on both sides, both what it's like to be a student, online student in this learning environment, as well as working with current students. The capstone project was a really important part of the program, and I think an incredibly effective way to bring the theoretical information that you learn within the program to sort of reality. You have a mentor that works with you very closely throughout the project development and finalizing it. So you're sort of never feeling like you're out there struggling alone without having one of the instructors there by your side to sort of guide you. Many students work on capstone programs that are related to if you're working in a hospital setting or a healthcare setting, that are relevant to the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So it does, especially when you're working full-time going through one of these programs, it's really useful to know that the work that you're doing within the program will also hopefully benefit you at your work site.
No, that's great. Thank you. And then, yeah, if we could go to the last slide. The last slide here is really just kind of letting you know a lot of students that prospective students and students that end up doing the program ask us, is this right for me? So this is just kind of letting you know, here's who the people are. A lot of times, not just when they're done, but when they're entering the program, these are the types of students that we're getting to start the program for. So for a number of students, this can be a second, third, even fourth graduate program in terms of doing the program. So just wanted to share that with you as well. But yeah, I think we can go to the last slide, and then what we'll do is just go ahead and if you have questions either about the program or really for Laura about her the content of her presentation specifically, you can type them into the question box down there, and we'll attempt to answer them.
I will add one more thing. So
sure.
As a student of this program, when I enrolled in it, I had been working in sort of patient safety and quality probably for about maybe 8 or 10 years. And what I quickly learned once I enrolled was that whereas I felt like I was doing my job pretty well, I didn't have the theoretical and evidence-based background to sort of support the work that I was doing. So one thing that you find as a student is literally from the first week of the program, you're taking information that you're learning through your reading and your writing and your interaction with your other cohort members, and you're directly applying it to the work that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And that I hear consistently from even the most seasoned safety and quality professionals at the VP level, that the work that they're doing within the program has a direct influence and really enhances the work that they're doing on a day-to-day basis back at their work life.
No, thank you, Laura. And yes, I would say, and I know this from being at a number of conferences with you and having interacted with you for a number of years. Laura brings a great perspective because she has both having been a student and now teaching in it. So we always appreciate your perspective from both sides for sure.
My pleasure.
But yeah, we'll go ahead and open up. And it looks like we have our first question here. Hello, is there a minimum number of courses to be taken each semester? The program, and thanks, Shireen, I hope I'm pronouncing your name there correctly. There is essentially the way that the program works is it takes the 16-week semester and splits it in half to 2 8-week terms. So you're usually taking one course per 8 weeks so that you can concentrate on one course. Hopefully that answers the question. You do have the ability, so the courses are meant to be taken sequentially. You have the ability to stop out, meaning to stop out for a certain amount of time and then re-enter the program. You don't want to necessarily sit out for more than a year because then you do have to reapply. would be the caveat there.
This is Laura. So I think that the way that it's set up is really conducive, at least from my perspective, going to a program like this and working full time, because it allows you to focus for 8 weeks on a particular issue with one instructor, and it's intense, but it's manageable. I'm not sure I would have been able to be as successful juggling 2 or 3 different classes at a time.
No. Thank you. All right, other questions? I know there's always a little bit of a delay here when between asking and then them showing up for us to answer. But please do feel free. Okay, yep. Thanks, Shireen. Yeah, and if you're ready to get started, definitely feel free to email the online info if you haven't already. So the online info at uic.edu. We can sort of get you going. Up and here, great presentation, Laura, from a panelist here or an attendee. And then will the slides be available? Yes, so we will be sending the presentation out to everybody who RSVP'd after the fact.
And if anybody has questions later on, please don't hesitate. You can email
Yes.
Sean and or this even at the online info email, and I'm happy to. They'll pass it along to me, and I'm happy to answer any.
Yes. No. Thank you. Thank you. Another question: the percentage of international students in the masters. I don't know that we necessarily have an exact percentage. I will say usually, if I can answer in a typical class, in a class of 15 to 20, which is usually the starting class, around that amount, there are typically 2 or 3 that are students that are located internationally when they're starting the program.
And we really get students from all over the world, which can be a bit. It makes for an incredibly rich discussion because you get perspectives from countries that are very well resourced to countries that are less resourced, different models of care delivery, different models of reimbursement. So it's really it's one nice thing about this program is that you're not limited by geography. It's really a worldwide program, and from a perspective of not only a student but as an instructor, it really adds a lot of depth to the program.
Thanks, Sean and Laura. No problem. Any other questions? I know we were kind of over the limit here, but if you have questions, feel free to type them now. Okay, I'm going to give it a 1, 2, 3, and if I don't see anything. All right, well, we're definitely not going anywhere. So as Laura said, if you have questions about the program or questions for Laura specifically about her presentation, feel free to email the online info at uic.edu and we'll get you an answer. But again, thank you, Laura, for the presentation. It was a great presentation.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks everybody for viewing in.
And thanks everybody for joining us. Everybody have a great day.
Bye-bye.